Hello and welcome to DesiVimarsh. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Great to be here.
This series is specially designed for you, whether you're a software engineer, maybe an IT job seeker, or perhaps a computer science student. We really want to help you stay ahead in the tech world.
Yeah, whether you're deep in the industry or, just starting out, we're aiming to help you grasp these key concepts that are really shaping how tech gets delivered.
And today we are taking a deep dive into Agile Project Management. It's one of the most widely used, most demanded methodologies out there in modern software development.
Absolutely. We'll be talking about things like sprints, user stories.
Yeah.
You'll hear about frameworks like Scrum, Kanban, maybe even a bit on XP, extreme programming.
Our mission today really is to distill the most important insights from a lot of solid sources and give you a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed about this whole Agile thing.
That's the plan. Cut through the noise. All the info we're sharing, it's based on pretty thorough research. We've looked at good tech websites, established project management frameworks, trusted educational channels. We're sort of your guides today.
Guides to understanding not just what Agile is, but really why it's such a big deal and, maybe more importantly, how it actually works in the real world.
Exactly.
Okay, before we jump right in, just a quick reminder. Make sure to subscribe to DesiVimarsh. Hit that bell icon too so you never miss an update from our tech and current affairs series.
All right, let's get started.
Let's do it. So let's really unpack this first. What exactly is Agile Project Management? And why has it, become so fundamental, especially in tech?
Right. So the word itself, agile, it basically means swift or versatile, right?
Right.
And in project management, especially software development, which is where it really took off, it's an approach that's centered on iterative development.
Iterative development. Okay, so that means not doing everything all at once.
Precisely. It means you don't try to plan every single tiny detail of a huge, complex project right at the very beginning. That's kind of the old way. Instead, you break it down.
Break it down into
Smaller, more manageable pieces or chunks. These are often called iterations, or probably more commonly sprints. We'll definitely talk more about sprints later.
Okay, sprints. Got it. That immediately makes me think of, the traditional methods, like waterfall, where you map out the entire project, every single phase, every deliverable, before anyone writes a line of code.
Exactly, the waterfall model. And the big challenge there, as you hinted, is change. If requirements shift halfway through a long waterfall project.
Oh yeah, it can be chaos, right? Super expensive, throws everything off schedule.
Totally. So Agile flips that. The iterative part means you're delivering value, actual working stuff, much more frequently.
So you see benefits during the project, not just waiting until the very end.
That's the core idea. Unlike those traditional models where value maybe only appears right at the end of a long, often very rigid process, Agile strives to deliver working benefits throughout the project lifecycle. It really prioritizes continuous adaptability. It expects things to change, and it's built to evolve in response to those changing needs or new information.
Can you give an example? Like, how would that look?
Sure. Think about building a complex piece of software, maybe a new mobile app. In a waterfall approach, you'd spend months defining every screen, every button, then build it all, then test it all, and finally release it.
And hope you got it right 6 months ago.
Right. With Agile, you might say, okay, in the first 2-week sprint, let's just build the login screen and maybe the basic profile view. You build that, test it, maybe even show it to some users.
Get feedback immediately.
Exactly. Then in the next sprint, you add photo uploads based on that feedback. Then commenting. You're building it piece by piece, delivering value incrementally, and constantly checking if you're on the right track.
That makes a lot more sense, especially when things change so fast. So it's not just about speed. It sounds like it's heavily about flexibility and that constant feedback loop.
Absolutely. Flexibility and feedback are huge. And underpinning that are some core ideals. Things like trust within the team, empowerment of the individuals doing the work.
Empowerment, how?
Well, instead of a manager dictating every single task, Agile teams are often self-organizing. They're given the goals, the what, and they figure out the best how to achieve them.
Okay, so more autonomy for the team.
Yes, and that fosters ownership. There's also a really strong emphasis on continuous cooperation, not just within the tech team, but crucially with the customer or the business stakeholders.
So the business side isn't just handing over requirements and disappearing.
Ideally, no. They're actively involved. The ultimate goal is always to provide the maximum possible value against the business priorities. You do that within the agreed time and budget constraints, of course, but the focus is value.
Meticulously managed, you said. So it's not just chaos, they're still planning.
Oh, definitely. Agile involves a lot of planning, just not all up front. It blends planning and execution in these short cycles, allowing teams to adjust quickly and, efficiently when requirements inevitably change.
Right, so the principles seem to highlight breaking requirements into smaller bits, prioritizing them.
Yep, based on business value usually.
And this strong emphasis on collaboration, especially with the customer, frequently, like not just at the beginning and end.
Constantly. And the team itself is always reflecting, learning, and adjusting its own process too. The aim is to keep the customer happy by consistently delivering valuable stuff, even if their needs shift later in the game. It feels like a much more responsive way of work. It really is. And you asked why Agile is so big now. Well, think about today's market. It's incredibly fast-paced, volatile sometimes.
Technology changes, competitors pop up, customer expectations shift.
Exactly. Those rigid traditional approaches, they really struggle with that kind of environment. Waterfall, for instance, assumes you can know everything up front and that it won't change much.
Which is rarely true for complex projects.
Very rarely. And like we said, making changes late in a waterfall cycle is often incredibly costly, disruptive, maybe even impossible sometimes. Agile offers a powerful alternative because it expects change. It allows the project's direction to shift as the work progresses, ensuring that what you end up building is still relevant and valuable.
So let's bring this down to the individual level. For you listening, maybe you're a developer, a tester, a project manager, or someone wanting to get into tech clan. What does this mean practically?
Well, Agile empowers the people actually doing the work. It tends to increase accountability because teams own their commitments. But it also promotes a wider variety of ideas because you're encouraging collaboration and input from everyone.
And the deeper insight there, maybe, is why that empowerment matters, right? It acknowledges that the people closest to the actual work often have the best understanding of the problems and potentially the best solutions.
That's a fantastic point. It taps into the collective intelligence of the team.
And by empowering them and fostering what sometimes people call a fail-fast mentality, which isn't about failing grandly, but learning from small, early missteps.
Right. Learning quickly and cheaply.
You don't just see the benefits of the product sooner, you also unlock more creative solutions. You build a more resilient team culture where mistakes are seen as learning opportunities, not, career-ending disasters.
That resilience is key. And Agile is incredibly effective, actually, in promoting cultural change within organizations because the changes it introduces are often progressive, evolutionary, rather than some big, scary revolution.
Easier to adopt incrementally.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
It helps build strong involvement from clients and users because they're part of the process. It allows decisions and experiments to be tried and maybe rejected early on when the cost of change is low.
Which is, like you said, a stark contrast to those older models where you might invest months or years before finding a fundamental flaw right before launch.
Leading to massive rework, budget overruns, or launching something nobody wants. Agile aims to avoid that scenario by validating assumptions continuously.
And it's interesting how it's spreading, isn't it? It's definitely not just for IT or software teams anymore.
Not at all. While it was born in software development, the principles are being adopted all over the place.
Like where?
We're seeing marketing teams use agile approaches like Scrum or Kanban to manage campaigns. Universities are using it for curriculum development. Even the military uses agile concepts for managing complex, rapidly changing operations.
Wow, the military.
Yeah, adapting plans quickly based on changing conditions on the ground. And the automotive industry is using it for designing new vehicles.
Yeah.
Its sort of simplicity in setup, relatively speaking, and its versatility make it really applicable across a wide range of situations where you need to develop creative solutions in complex, unpredictable environments.
It's really moving beyond its software origins.
Definitely. And that versatility, that broad applicability, it really stems directly from Agile's foundational values. There are 4 core values, often called the Agile Manifesto, that really guide how effective Agile teams operate.
Okay, the manifesto values. Let's break those down. What's the first one?
The first value is individuals and interactions over processes and tools.
Okay, what does that mean in practice? More important than having the fanciest software.
Essentially, yes. It means prioritizing direct communication and collaboration between team members over rigidly sticking to a predefined process or relying solely on tools. Think about a quick daily stand-up meeting where everyone syncs up face-to-face, or virtually face-to-face now.
Right, actually talking to each other.
Yes, versus just, say, updating a status in a tool or sending emails back and forth. It minimizes those communication gaps that can easily happen in more traditional document-heavy approaches. It fosters a more immediate, fluid exchange of ideas and helps build team cohesion.
Okay, people talking first. That seems sensible. What's next?
The second value, working software over comprehensive documentation.
Ugh. This one sometimes gets misinterpreted, doesn't it? Like, Agile means no documentation.
It absolutely does get misinterpreted. It doesn't mean no documentation. It means the primary measure of progress, the thing you value most, is functional, working software that delivers value to the user.
So the emphasis is on actually building something useful frequently.
Exactly. Documentation still exists in Agile, but it tends to be leaner, more focused, maybe just enough or just in time. Often it's integrated directly into the workflow tools, like user stories in Jira or Confluence pages, rather than massive static specification documents written months ago that nobody reads.
Right. The insight isn't no docs, but documentation that serves the goal of creating working software. A living user story might tell you more about current status than a dusty 50-page spec.
Precisely. The real value is in the ongoing conversation around the requirements and the working code itself, not just the paper trail.
Makes sense. Value number 3.
Customer collaboration over contract negotiation.
Okay, this sounds like a big shift from traditional client-vendor relationships.
It really is. Instead of having a very strict, often adversarial contract where every single detail is hammered out and locked down up front.
And then you argue about scope changes later.
Right. Agile thrives on continuous partnership with the customer. Often there's a dedicated customer representative, maybe called the product owner, who actively participates in the project, day to day even.
So they're part of the team, in a way.
In a very real way. They're there to provide clarity, answer questions, give feedback, and make sure the team is always building what the customer truly needs, which might even evolve, rather than just what was initially thought to be needed 6 months prior. It drastically reduces communication gaps and misunderstandings.
Constant alignment. Okay, and the last value.
Number 4 is responding to changeover following a plan.
This seems like the heart of Agile, doesn't it?
It's certainly a critical differentiator. This value explicitly acknowledges that requirements will change. It's almost inevitable in complex projects. Market conditions shift, users give feedback, new opportunities arise.
So instead of fighting change, you embrace it.
You build a process that can embrace it. Agile structure, especially with things like short sprints and independent user stories that we'll talk more about, allows for flexibility and adaptation throughout the project lifecycle. Even late in development, you can often pivot or incorporate changes relatively easily compared to traditional models.
That makes Agile projects much more resilient, right?
Uh-huh.
Resilient to market shifts, changing business needs.
Exactly. It prevents you from rigidly following a plan that might be leading you towards building an obsolete or irrelevant product. It keeps the focus on delivering current value.
So those are the 4 values, and they lead to specific principles, right? Practical ways of working.
Yes, the manifesto also outlines 12 principles, but they all flow from these 4 core values. For instance, one key principle is the emphasis on cross-functional teams, meaning the team collectively has all the skills necessary: analysis, design, development, testing, deployment, to take a feature from idea to completion, without needing to hand off constantly to other siloed departments. Business people and technical people work together daily.
So everyone's on the same platform, working towards the same goal. Does that mean everyone has to be an expert in everything?
Not necessarily an expert in everything, but team members are expected to be, let's say, T-shaped, having deep expertise in one area, but also broader skills, and a willingness to collaborate and help out across different tasks. The focus isn't really on individual multitasking, like juggling 5 unrelated projects.
Oh, okay.
So it's more about the team collectively having those cross-functional capabilities and applying them to finish one piece of work, one user story, completely before starting the next, ensuring a smooth flow of finished working increments.
Got it. Team capability, not just individual multitasking. What other principles stand out?
Another key one is promoting face-to-face conversation, or its closest virtual equivalent, as the most efficient and effective method of conveying information within the development team.
Back to that individuals and interactions value.
Exactly. Minimizes misunderstandings compared to relying solely on written documents or emails. Those daily Scrum meetings we mentioned are a prime example of facilitating this direct interaction.
Okay.
There's also continuous focus on technical excellence and good design. Agile isn't an excuse for sloppy code. In fact, principles like sustainable pace and maintaining technical quality are crucial for being able to respond to change effectively over the long term.
So building things well makes it easier to change them later.
Precisely. The goal is sustainable development, delivering value consistently, sprint after sprint, without burning out the team or accumulating massive technical debt. And progress is measured by working software, not just by ticking off tasks on a plan.
All right, that gives a really good grounding in the philosophy. Now, you mentioned frameworks earlier. You said Agile is like an umbrella term.
That's right. Agile itself is a set of values and principles, a mindset. Underneath that umbrella, there are various frameworks and methodologies that provide specific structures and practices for implementing Agile.
And probably the most famous one is Scrum.
By far the most well-known and widely adopted, yes. Especially for teams new to Agile, because it offers a pretty clear, though some say prescriptive, structure.
Prescriptive meaning it has defined rules and roles.
Exactly. Scrum is designed, according to its guide, to help teams deliver high-value products productively and creatively, particularly when dealing with complex, adaptive problems, which describes most software development.
Okay, so let's dive into Scrum. What are the key components? You mentioned roles.
Yes, Scrum defines 3 distinct, non-negotiable roles. Each one has specific responsibilities that are crucial for making the whole thing work and fostering those Agile values.
Role number 1.
First, you have the product owner, or PO. This person acts as the voice of the customer or the business. They need to have a crystal clear vision of what the product should achieve and, really importantly, why.
So they own the product's direction.
They own the product backlog, yes. Their responsibilities include defining the overall product goal and vision. They often create larger features, sometimes called epics, and work with the team to break those down into smaller, more granular user stories.
User stories, those are the short requirement descriptions.
Yep, usually written from the user's perspective, like, as a type of user, I want to perform some action so that I get some benefit. The PO is responsible for creating, managing, and constantly prioritizing this list of all work items. That's the product backlog.
So they decide what's most important to build next.
Correct. A good product owner isn't just someone who gathers requirements. They're a strategic decision maker, deeply involved, collaborating daily with the development team to provide clarity and make trade-offs.
Okay, PO owns the what and why, who builds it.
That's the Scrum team, sometimes called the development team in older Scrum guides. This is really the engine room. It's a self-organizing, cross-functional group. Remember that principle?
Yeah.
Typically around, say, 7 or 8 people, maybe a few more or less. It includes developers, testers, designers, anyone needed to turn those backlog items into a finished product increment.
And they're collectively responsible for getting the work done.
Collectively responsible, yes. They embrace those cross-functional capabilities we talked about. They figure out how to best implement the items selected from the product backlog for a given sprint. They own the how of the work.
Okay, PO for what, why, team for how. What's the third role?
The third role is the Scrum Master. This role is often described, interestingly, as a servant leader.
Servant leader. What does that mean? Not the boss.
Not the boss in the traditional sense, no. The Scrum Master serves the product owner, the Scrum team, and the wider organization in several ways. Their main job is to guide the team in understanding and effectively applying Scrum's theory, practices, rules, and values.
So like a coach for the Scrum process.
A coach, a facilitator, and an impediment remover. They facilitate the Scrum events, or ceremonies, to ensure they're productive. And crucially, they help remove any obstacles, impediments that are blocking the team's progress.
Impediments like technical problems or organizational issues?
Could be anything. A technical blocker, a dependency on another team, lack of clarity from the PO, an organizational policy getting in the way, even interpersonal conflicts within the team. The Scrum Master works to resolve these so the team can stay focused and productive.
Do they manage the team's work?
They don't manage the tasks, the team self-organizes around that. But they do help track the team's progress towards its goals, often using tools like burn down or burn up charts or tracking velocity.
Velocity, what's that?
Velocity is basically a measure of how much work a team typically completes in a sprint. It's usually measured in story points or some other relative unit. It's primarily used for planning, helping the team forecast how much work they can realistically take on in future sprints.
So it helps with predictability.
It can, yes. But there's a common pitfall here. Velocity should not be used as a performance metric to compare teams or individuals. That can lead to teams artificially inflating estimates just to look good, which completely undermines the purpose and kills trust. A good Scrum Master helps the team use velocity wisely as a tool for their own planning and improvement, not as a weapon.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. So we have the PO, the team, the Scrum Master. How do they interact day to day? You mentioned ceremonies.
Right, Scrum provides a structure through specific events, often called ceremonies, though the official term is events. These create a predictable rhythm for each sprint and ensure opportunities for inspection and adaptation.
What's the first event?
It all starts with sprint planning. This happens at the very beginning of each sprint. A sprint, by the way, is that short, time-boxed iteration we talked about, usually fixed length, maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4 weeks. Most common is probably 2 weeks.
Okay, so at the start of those 2 weeks, you have sprint planning. What happens there?
The entire Scrum team, it's the PO, the team, and the Scrum Master, collaborates. They discuss the objective for the upcoming sprint, the sprint goal, and select items from the top of the prioritized product backlog that they believe they can complete within the sprint timeframe.
So they commit to a chunk of work.
They forecast what they can achieve. They create a plan for how they'll build the selected items into a finished increment. The selected work plus the plan becomes the sprint backlog.
Got it. Then the sprint starts. What happens during the sprint?
During the sprint, the main event is the daily scrum, sometimes called the daily stand-up. This is a quick 15-minute meeting held at the same time and place every day.
Standing up, usually.
Often, yeah, helps keep it brief. The purpose is for the development team members to synchronize their activities and create a plan for the next 24 hours. It's about inspecting progress towards the sprint goal and identifying any impediments.
So not a status report for a manager?
Definitely not. It's a planning meeting for the team, by the team. Typically, each member might briefly cover what they did yesterday to help meet the sprint goal, what they'll do today, and any obstacles they're facing. It's rapid coordination, not deep problem solving.
Okay, quick daily sync. Then what?
Then the sprint itself is the container for all the other events and the actual development work. During the sprint, the Scrum team works intensely, focusing only on the tasks needed to achieve the sprint goal and deliver the items in the sprint backlog. The goal is to produce a potentially shippable increment of working software by the end.
No changes allowed during the sprint.
The sprint goal should remain stable, but the scope can be renegotiated between the PO and the development team if more is learned. Major disruptive changes are generally discouraged to protect the team's focus.
Okay, so the team works for, say, 2 weeks. What happens at the end?
At the end of the sprint, there are two crucial events for inspection and adaptation. First is the sprint review.
Is that where they show off what they built?
Pretty much. The Scrum team presents the work they completed the done increment to stakeholders, including the product owner. It's an informal meeting, not a formal presentation. The goal is to get feedback on the product increment and discuss what to do next. The product backlog might be adjusted based on this feedback.
So immediate feedback on the actual product.
Exactly. And this is where the product owner formally accepts whether the work meets the agreed-upon definition of done, the criteria for completeness.
Okay, review the product. What's the other event?
The other event is the sprint retrospective. This happens after the sprint review but before the next sprint planning.
What's the focus here?
This is where the Scrum team inspects itself. They reflect on the past sprint in terms of people, relationships, processes, and tools. What went well? What problems did they encounter? How can they improve the way they work together in the next sprint?
So continuous improvement of the team's own process.
Precisely. They identify specific improvements and create a plan for implementing them in the upcoming sprint. This drives that learning and adaptation cycle within the team itself. It's fundamental to Scrum's empirical nature.
So planning, daily Scrum, the sprint itself, review, retrospective, that's the cycle.
That's the core cycle, yes. And supporting these events are the Scrum artifacts. These represent work or value and provide transparency and opportunities for inspection and adaptation. We've mentioned them already.
Right, the product backlog.
Yes, the single source of truth for all requirements, ordered by the PO. Then there's the sprint backlog, the set of product backlog items selected for the sprint, plus the plan for delivering them. And finally, the increment.
The increment being?
The sum of all the product backlog items completed during a sprint, plus the value of all increments from previous sprints. By the end of a sprint, the new increment must be done, meaning it's in a usable condition and meets the definition of done. It should be potentially shippable, even if the PO decides not to release it yet.
So each sprint produces a potentially releasable piece of the product.
That's the goal. It provides transparency on the actual progress and allows for frequent value delivery.
Okay, Scrum seems very structured. You mentioned it's popular, but it's not the only way to do Agile, right? What about things like Kanban or that XP thing you mentioned?
Excellent point. Scrum is very common, but Agile is broader. Kanban is another very popular Agile approach, but it works quite differently from Scrum.
How so? No sprints.
Correct. Kanban is less prescriptive about roles and time boxes. It's really focused on flow, managing the flow of work through a system, and continuous delivery. It emphasizes visualizing the workflow, limiting work in progress, WIP, and actively managing the flow to make it smooth and predictable.
Visualizing the workflow, like with a Kanban board.
Exactly. The classic Kanban board with columns representing stages of work like to do, in progress, testing, done, tasks represented by cards move across the board.
And limiting work in progress. Why is that important?
That's maybe the most crucial part of Kanban. By limiting how many items can be in the in-progress state or any other active state at one time, you prevent bottlenecks. It forces the team to finish work before starting new work. This improves flow, reduces lead time, how long it takes a task to get done, and often improves quality because people aren't constantly context switching.
So it's about optimizing the delivery pipeline. When would you use Kanban instead of Scrum?
It's often very effective for teams dealing with a continuous flow of unpredictable work, like IT operations, support teams, or maintenance teams, where fixed-length sprints might not fit well. But many development teams use it too, especially if they're focused on continuous deployment.
Interesting. So it offers flexibility in a different way. And what about extreme programming or XP? That sounds intense.
It can sound intense. XP is fascinating because it's less about the project management framework like Scrum or Kanban, and more about specific software engineering practices that support Agile principles. It's really focused on producing high-quality code and enabling rapid, sustainable development.
So practices for how you actually build the software.
Exactly. While Scrum tells you how to organize the work, sprints, roles, events, XP offers concrete practices for the development team. Things like,
Like what?
well, pair programming is a big one. Two developers working together at one machine, collaborating directly on the same code, leads to higher quality, better knowledge sharing.
Okay.
Test-driven development, TDD, where you write an automated test before you write the actual code to make that test pass. This drives design and ensures you have a safety net of tests.
Write the test first. Interesting.
Yeah. Also, continuous integration, CI, where developers merge their code changes back into the main code base very frequently, ideally multiple times a day, triggering automated builds and tests. Catches integration issues early, and refactoring continuously improving the internal structure of existing code without changing its external behavior to keep it clean and easy to maintain.
So XP is really about baking quality and collaboration directly into the coding process itself.
That's a great way to put it. It emphasizes communication, simplicity, feedback, courage, and respect. Those are its core values.
Could a team use both Scrum and XP practices?
Absolutely. And many, many teams do. It's very common to use Scrum as the overall management framework, managing the backlogs, sprints, reviews, but adopt XP engineering practices like TDD, pair programming, and CI within the sprints to ensure technical excellence and sustainable pace.
So you can mix and match.
Yes, the beauty of Agile is its adaptability. These aren't mutually exclusive religions. You choose and tailor the frameworks and practices that best fit your team, your project, your organizational context. The goal is always the same: delivering value effectively, adapting to change, and continuously improving.
Okay, that makes sense. You pick the tools that work for the job. So we've covered the what and why, the values, the frameworks like Scrum, Kanban, XP. Let's talk about the bigger picture planning. How do you actually go from a grand vision, a big idea, down to these sprints and shippable products? There must be some planning beyond just the next 2 weeks.
Oh, absolutely. While Agile emphasizes iterative execution, there's definitely a structured, though still iterative, planning process that happens at different levels. It's not just random sprints.
What's the starting point?
It really begins with defining the product mission and scope. You need a clear understanding of the fundamental business need. What problem are we trying to solve? What's the ultimate goal? Are we enhancing an existing product or building something entirely new? What's the overall vision the client or business wants to achieve?
So getting that high-level alignment first, why is that so critical?
Because without that clarity, even the most efficient Agile team could build the wrong thing perfectly. You need that North Star to guide all the subsequent decisions about features and priorities. This initial clarity is absolutely crucial for success.
Okay, mission and scope defined. What's next?
Next, the product owner typically develops a product roadmap. Now, this isn't a rigid, fixed-in-stone Gantt chart showing dates for the next 2 years.
Right, that wouldn't be very agile.
Exactly. It's more like a high-level visual representation of the major features or capabilities, often called epics, that are planned for the product over time. It shows the intended direction and evolution, maybe grouped into themes or major releases.
And it can change.
It absolutely can and probably will change based on feedback and learning. The roadmap also often involves identifying the minimum viable product, MVP.
MVP, what's that again?
The MVP is the most basic version of the product that you can release that still delivers core value to early adopter customers and allows you to start collecting validated learning about their needs. Think of it like if you're building a car, the MVP isn't one wheel, it's maybe a skateboard. It gets you from A to B, solving the core transportation problem, albeit simply.
Okay, the smallest thing that provides real value and lets you learn.
Precisely. Releasing an MVP helps reduce risk by getting something real into users' hands quickly. The feedback you get then directly informs how the rest of the product roadmap evolves. You might discover some planned features aren't needed or identify new ones you hadn't thought of.
So, roadmap provides direction, MVP gets early feedback. Then what?
This often leads into release planning. While you might release features continuously, sometimes you plan work in larger chunks or releases, maybe every few months. Release planning involves looking at the roadmap and the prioritized product backlog and figuring out which set of features or epics can realistically be delivered within a particular release timeframe.
Like grouping several sprints together towards a larger milestone?
Kind of, yes. For instance, a year-long project might be broken down into 3 or 4 major releases. The product owner, working with the team and Scrum Master, would prioritize which epics and key user stories should be completed within each release, considering dependencies, complexity, market windows, etc. It provides that midterm planning horizon, balancing the long-term vision with the short-term sprint execution.
And then within those releases, that's where the sprint planning and the sprints themselves happen, right? That cycle we discussed.
Exactly. Release planning sets the context, then sprint planning breaks down the highest priority items for the next sprint. It's a continuous cycle. Define the vision, create a flexible roadmap, plan releases, execute in short sprints, demonstrate working software, get feedback, adapt the plans, and repeat.
And those user stories are key to that flexibility, aren't they? Being small and independent means you can reprioritize them between sprints easily.
Absolutely. Well-written user stories, often following the INDVS criteria, independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, testable, are fundamental to allowing that flexibility and responsiveness at the sprint level.
Okay, this sounds powerful, but it can't be perfect, right? What are some common challenges or pitfalls when teams try to adopt Agile?
Oh, it's definitely not a magic bullet, and adoption can be tricky. One of the most common pitfalls is what people sometimes call agile theater or cargo cult agile.
Agile theater, like just going through the motions.
Exactly. Organizations adopt the ceremonies, they do daily stand-ups, they have sprints, they call people Scrum Masters, but they haven't actually embraced the underlying values and principles. The mindset hasn't shifted.
So they might have stand-ups, but managers are still dictating tasks, or teams aren't really empowered.
Precisely. They have the appearance of agile, but they're still operating with the top-down command and control hierarchy. They miss the core ideas of self-organization, trust, customer collaboration, and responding to change. You need that cultural shift, not just new process names.
That makes sense. It's deeper than just the practices. What else?
We touched on it earlier, the misuse of metrics, especially velocity. Treating velocity as a team performance benchmark or comparing velocities between different teams is almost always counterproductive.
Right, leading to inflated estimates and mistrust.
Yeah. True agile success relies heavily on transparency, trust, and psychological safety, creating an environment where it's safe to experiment, to raise problems, to learn from failures without blame. That's not always easy to establish, especially in larger, more traditional organizations with established hierarchies and cultures.
So it requires real commitment from leadership, too, not just the teams.
Absolutely critical.
Mm.
Leadership needs to champion the values, provide support, remove organizational impediments, and trust the teams. But when organizations do manage to make that shift, the payoff in terms of speed, quality, employee engagement, and responsiveness to customer needs can be immense.
So wrapping this up, Agile Project Management, it sounds like it's much more than just a methodology.
It really is. It's more of a fundamental shift in mindset, I'd say. Moving away from those rigid, predictive, long-term plans towards a much more flexible, adaptive approach. An approach that truly embraces change, deeply values collaboration, and keeps a relentless focus on continuously delivering actual value. That's why it's become pretty much indispensable in today's dynamic tech landscape, and increasingly beyond tech, too.
Yeah, that emphasis on empowered teams, teams that organize themselves, the constant back and forth with the customer, prioritizing working software, it all translates into a way of working that feels more responsive, more accountable.
And ultimately more effective for building the right products. It's about empowering everyone involved to truly own their work and deliver what customers genuinely need faster and, ideally, with higher quality built in.
It empowers people to solve problems creatively.
Exactly. And that leads to a really important question, maybe, for you listening right now. How might adopting just some of these agile principles, maybe focusing on iterative work, breaking big tasks down, or improving clear, direct communication, or simply getting better at adapting to unexpected changes, how might that transform the way you approach your own projects or solve problems, even if it's completely outside of software development?
That's a great thought to ponder, something everyone can probably apply in some way. Thank you for joining us on today's deep dive on Agile Project Management.
My pleasure.
If you found this deep dive helpful, please do like, share, and subscribe to support our channel. We regularly post content aimed at making complex topics simple and practical, especially if you're interested in tech, current affairs, or self-growth. And if you're new here, definitely check out our previous deep dives and make sure you press that bell icon so you never miss an update from us. This is DesiVimarsh helping you stay informed and inspired. See you in the next episode where we simplify something new together.